Dr. Andy Yates, Incongruous Channel. This is part 5 of my theory of energy being the explanation to everything paranormal. I've just talked about ghosts, and I've got to the point of saying that I've explained kind of what my theories suggest that ghosts are. A mind-life energy with cohesion. In other words, the thing that is released when somebody dies physically, and this thing is released, and because it has cohesion, it stays together. So it's got personality, character, ego, everything about a person except for the physical body. Now, my partner and I have carried out quite a few house clearances. People want us to do it, we do it. It's a good thing to do. Friends and associated clients, we don't really run a business anymore. We've retired, which is nice. But it's something we'll do if somebody wants us to help them. Why not? Indeed. And when you go into one of these houses, the energy is palpable. You can feel it when you come in the door. I'm not some really psychic person or anything like that, you know. Oh, I feel the spirit. No, I'm not like that. I just walk in and go, oh God, it feels dark in here. You just get a feeling. And maybe it's maybe I have got a bit of an ability, or not ability, but an open-mindedness towards that sort of thing. I don't know. But anyway, you can feel it. And when you go around the house, you can find concentrations of this energy. You'll go into a place. It's funny because we've used various different ways of doing things. We often use a tingsha, Tibetan dingy little gong things. And you can hear the difference. You go around the house and it's ding, 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 dunk. Oh, dunk. Because the energy somehow is stopping that thing resonating. Had it with drums, had it with other kind of things like this. When you're using smoke from like a smudge wand, you know, sage or something like that. You see the smoke and it's going up nice and straight, and then suddenly it goes brrr, up there and brrr, across that way. And you're like, oh, what's that then? And so you just concentrate on clearing that area, using the good smoke, using the good sound, using the good stuff, plus your own energies, sending kind of love and or forgiveness or whatever it is necessary. And after a clearance, you can actually, again, if you feel the negativity when you come to the place, you can feel the change towards positive when you leave. It's actually improved, which is rather wonderful, you know. Now, sometimes the energies may already be present. Sometimes people move in and they kind of bring it with them. Sometimes they strengthen it. Sometimes in a way you're more about changing their energy than the energy of the house because they're creating it. But that's okay. And that's all we do. We don't do exactly exorcisms or anything like that, although we've done things like that. But that's not what we do. We just go in with nice energy and clear things out and start at the front door and finish at the back kind of thing. And of course, if there are dead people's spirits, could there be spirits of other kinds of spiritual entities? Because my theories tend to suggest that spirits are dead people, right? Could there be other spiritual entities? But to me, it should follow that once they would have been alive and have become spiritual beings. But people talk about things like angels, demons, fairies, to mention a few. And I can always come back to my earlier statement about the difference between the mind and the brain. The brain is a translator of energy into physical thought. It makes pattern matching and so on and so on. So it will match something to something it already knows to make it understandable. So if you pick up a good energy, you might translate that to an angel, right? If you pick up a bad energy, you might translate it to something else that's kind of bad, right? So the belief of an individual would have to be considered as far as those other entities that may not have lived. And if they're presented with an energetic energy, a spirit energy that they don't recognize at all, and the brain's just going to do the best it can to make sense out of that. And that could be anything, but it's going to be particularly based on the belief of that person. Yeah. So a powerful source of good could be an angel. A powerful source of bad might be a demon. And a fairy, somewhere in the middle, depending what you think a fairy is. Right? So we can think of human beings that if they've passed over, they're good, they're bad. And I guess if those dead humans came visiting, if that's a thing, if that can happen, then we would translate their energy into something like, if you're a Catholic, for example, Virgin Mary, demon, Satan. And of course, on the subject of good and bad, it's subjective. And I've had it explained to me that it's really just a continuum of energy, and depending where you are on that line, it's not about good or bad, it's about more like positive or negative. It's on the same line, a sliding scale. But there's lots of them. So there's not just positive and negative, there's positive and negative, there's also, what can you say, loving and hating. There's also empathic, non-empathic, sociopathic, etc., etc. There's lots and lots of lines of these different energies that make up a person. And that's what's in that spiritual energy package. Good and bad, different polarities, as I said, explained to me in that way. And polarity is perhaps an energy signature that might cause attraction or repulsion. So somebody alive, a human who has a certain type of energy, might attract a similar type of energy. It's possible. It's all possible. You get the idea. You can have a ghost, as I said, that's trapped in a location. You could go to that location. It could somehow attach to you because you have energy that fits in a way with it, or not. But there we are. So what our aim is in house clearance is just simply to change that energy. Because the idea is, if we change the energy, and let's talk in terms of positive and negative. If there's a negative energy in the house and we change that negative energy to a positive energy, it's going to tend to push the negative energy out. Even if it's the negative energy of the people that live in the house, it's going to tend to push that out. Okay, and that's all we're trying to do. We've never really, doing house clearances, experienced a entity type of energy. You know, a possession by a particular force or life force energy, like mind life energy, if you like. We've never really met that. And a lot of these ones you watch on the TV, there's a ghost or a spirit or something. We've never really met that. Although we have touched into those things in other ways, but not in house clearances. Just didn't seem to do that. The one thing I will say is, though, with these, there's a natural flow, right? So somebody dies and the mind life energy is released, if you accept all of that. And then that mind life energy goes on a journey, and I think it should be allowed to go on that journey. So when I've had people in my life that have passed over, I've really tried hard not to hang on to them. They'll come back if they want to, and when they can. And it would be wrong for me to try and hold them there with my love for them, whereas really, if I love them, I should let them go on their journey and do their stuff. Similarly, if you met a entity in something, let's say a house clearance, and you met some kind of entity, rather than just kicking them out of the house because they'll go next door, you want to send them on that same path. And there's a whole raft of training and stuff you can do that does that kind of thing. Right, so we're not going to get into that here. All right. And there it is. I think it's important. I mean, it was a process we used to use in therapy when you discover some kind of wrong energy. And the process, the one that we found was most effective, or I did, was dealing with it in terms of communicating either with the person who communicates with the energy that's inside them, or communicating directly with that energy that's inside them. Now, all of that may be symbolic and may actually be a psychological process that works through symbols to actually get to parts of their subconscious mind, and there isn't any kind of spirit available or existent. But it's important to say it's the same process. That in a sense, exorcism is the same as parts therapy. There you go. Probably got a lot of psychologists throwing down their Bibles and whatever, not their Bibles, their textbooks, and going, it's talking rubbish, whatever. What would Freud say? It was my dad. Anyway, let's go on to psychic phenomena. And when I talk about psychic phenomena, I'm talking about things like intuition, telepathy, psychometry, clairsense, and an experience I kind of talk about, which is a real example. So I mentioned extrasensory perception and mentioned the fact that some people may have more abilities to see things, perceive things, than others. So I don't know whether somebody can see auras for real. I know I, so far, can't. There it is. And there's been much research into psychic abilities from the skeptical and supportive point of view. And there's a lot of evidence that relates to scientific proof of such abilities. It's kind of weird, though, because it's almost like science is the wrong thing to be checking it. Because science doesn't accept the ideas of it. Actually, it's coming more into it now. You'll see a lot of programs now where a panel of scientists will talk about consciousness as a something, whereas years back they would not. Consciousness, it's got nothing to do with the molecular structure of this and that and this and that. When they got down to quantum physics, it was like, well, all bets are off, I'm afraid. When you've got particles that can pop in and out of existence, and you've got uncertainty principles, and you've got the Schrodinger's cat, and you've got waves and particles mixed up. And it's like, oh, God. Yeah, all bets are off. Yeah, you could have anything. Anyway, so, but there are honest questioners and there are also frauds. There are people who make money about being skeptics and also about being supporters, and vice versa. There are people who say they believe in these things and they don't. They just want to make a buck. And there are people who say they don't believe in it because that makes them a buck by being skeptical. It's a problem in our world nowadays. And in many senses, the only way to actually validate it is to experience it for yourself, or accept the word of people that you do trust. And that's where we get to experiential evidence. And that means it's valid to create a theory about that experiential evidence. Okay. Intuition. Okay, that's defined as the perception of facts, answers, and conclusions and truth without reasoning. And what we're basically saying is that intuition is a function of the subconscious mind and not the conscious mind, right? So, you've got savants, right? They can produce answers to incredible calculations and memory exercises and stuff like this. And in a sense, they don't even think about it. Yes, they do. Of course they do. But they don't cognitively process. It appears to them almost intuitively or spontaneously. And it pops into their head, this incredible mathematical calculation. Yeah. With their subconscious mind, I suggest they just know the answer. Now, many of us experience intuition. We know who's calling on the phone. That that's the one. And it's almost as if what we're doing is we're subconsciously accessing some other information from a physical source. That's one explanation. An energy stream that's out there. The 0 point field, I don't know. If you make a ripple in the 0 point field over here, that ripple is felt right to the extent of the universe, but only in a tiny, weeny way. Could you tap into that to go, oh, I think Fred's going to call. Ring, ring. Hello, Fred. It's just possible. And you experience it. You say, oh gosh, another phone call. I knew who that was going to be on the phone. Perhaps another variational type of energy field. And the concept of different energy fields is not far-fetched. In quantum field theory, the universe is made up of atoms and molecules, all of which have 0 point energy, like I've said. And the 0 point field is referred to as ether. And it's a universal substance that connects everything together. Is it possible that that could be the medium by which all things are connected? Because you often hear that, don't you? We're all connected. And that's how. We already know about it, but we don't understand it. That's part of the problem. But it does seem that it's possible that these kind of energy fields have the same etheric properties that could be available to the subconscious mind that then we define or we understand as being extrasensory perception. You get it. Okay. So, esoterics, philosophers and everything often refer to different levels of consciousness. The conscious, the subconscious, higher consciousness. And the idea of higher consciousness is that it transcends the physical being. In other words, it's up here. In this sense, perhaps people could use their higher consciousness to contact this other field of information. Like when the phone rings, you get that. And you intuitively know who's on the other end of the call. Now, telepathy is a concept of mind and mind-to-mind communication. And that's accessed by that same extrasensory perception. Is there a common medium by which such a communication could occur? Is there this field of energy that you could send a little signal out on that someone else could refer to? Or could you send it to them directly using this field of information? And you'd think that if it is possible, that they'd have to be somebody who's particularly good at sending it, and perhaps somebody who's particularly good at receiving it. Psychometry is the idea of a person holding an object and gaining information from that object. So you could have something in your hand and close your hand around it and then concentrate on it and then get a feeling of where the object came from, who owned it, what's its history, stuff like that. And you basically, so a psychic or a subject would read the object, read its information. But I struggle to explain the process because I've tried it many, many, many times in various different ways, because you could do a testing on it. So you put like little objects into little envelopes or something, so you can't see what's inside them or feel their shape or anything. And then you just put your hands on them and try and decide what's in there. And I am useless. Totally useless. I get nothing. It's annoying, but it's real. It's what it is, you know. There's no point in lying about it. I don't get anything. I was like, oh, okay, all right. But some people that I've been with, so I physically see it and I see them doing this, they're very accurate. I'm like, wow, that's impressive. How can they do that? It's really good, you know. So there we are. For psychometry to work. Now, if you think about the principle of that, so if it is working and they are getting that information and all that sort of thing, well, what's happening? Well, what's happening is they're getting some information from that object, which means that object must have some information embedded in it, stored in it, or something, right? So is that possible? Could it be the same kind of energy that we're talking about that might be available to us for communication and other sorts of things? My partner and I recently went to Cyprus. And one of the things in Cyprus, there's lots and lots and lots of churches, Greek Orthodox churches particularly. And they have this, I go in there and like I said, when I go into a house that we've come to do a clearance on, you get inside the door and you get a feeling of the energy that's in the house. I've run over time again. So let's come back to this. I get into it, don't I? All right. So this is Dr. Andy Yates. This is the Incongruous channel, and this is part 4, I think, of, is it part 5? Gosh, I get lost, you see. I'm cranking along so well, I thought I'd written it down. Maybe not. Part 4, I think, of the theory of energy being the explanation for everything paranormal. Take care until we get to part 5, I think.